Welcome everyone to this talk. What's it called? Key Elements in Radical Mobilisation. Sounds a bit of a mouthful. Thank you very much. So we're in King's College, which is very lucky and unusual because, as you may know, I've been chucked out twice from this place and threatened to resign once, but I'm still here, so let me back in. All the security people know me. I'll explain more later. So we're very privileged to still be allowed into the great liberal institutions of this society that haven't yet woken up, as you might say. Okay, so I am going to do two talks on my PhD research. I've been here for 4 years now. I had a chat with my supervisor last week, told me that I'm very close to getting seriously told off for not completing it. So I'm about to go on another interruption. Done one interruption already, but hopefully at some point I will actually complete it, but maybe not. As you may know, I'm involved in Extinction Rebellion and been very busy. So that's one of the reasons I haven't managed to complete it. And secondly, that's my excuse if this talk's a little bit like halting because I haven't spent much time thinking about it. Okay, but what I want to say first of all is I sort of can't really be bothered about being falsely modest. So my claim is that the research I've done is some of the most important research in the world. And that's not because I'm particularly amazing or anything. It's because at the moment we're facing existential crisis, which is one of those posh academic words for we're all fucked and we're going to die. And if you're not aware of that, then just look at the science, but we won't go there. So there's a little bit of an emergency on about how to mobilise people to actually sort the situation out in so much as it's sort-outable. And I've just spent 4 years doing it. And strangely enough, no one else seems to be studying this, or at least in the UK. So that's a little bit like tricky because obviously you've only got me to rely on, as it were. There are some people in the United States that do research on how to mobilize people for radical mobilizations campaigns. So and there's some people, obviously, in the 20th century who studied it. But it is a sign of our times that 99.9% of academics and research is not actually based upon what I would argue, and hopefully you will come to realize is the most important area of research, which is how to fix the climate crisis, which basically means how to mobilize people to rebel. So that's my claim. And it would be really nice if other people were doing some research, because then they could tell you where I've gone wrong, and I'm sure I have. But what I'm going to do is give you my version of events of the situation. Okay, so that's the dramatic opening. So what I want you to do, as you'll probably know if you've been to previous talks, is it's all going to be reasonably participatory for reasons I'll explain. So I want you to talk to the person next to you, introduce yourself, and you can talk about whatever you like, but you might want to talk about why you came tonight and what you have for dinner, whatever you like. Give me 5 minutes to write some things out on the board. So if you want to do that, that'd be great. Obviously, I've done like 4 years of research, so I could sort of talk to you for about 20 hours and really be boring. But so what I'm I had this idea that I'd just like take 6 provocative ideas, which don't make it particularly coherent, but just to sort of hopefully provoke you into trying to think about how to mobilize people to take political action in a new way. And each of these 6 ideas is going to be like a bit counterintuitive or go against what is the conventional wisdom. And I'm trying to do that because I'm trying to say that the reason why things have failed for the last 30 years is because we've been doing the wrong thing. Okay, so that's my claim. And obviously, like, the ideal thing is you do these 6 things. I mean, you could do less than these 6 things, but these are the 6 things that are important, I guess. And so I'm not really going to be trying to do some really sophisticated, coherent system, right? I'm just going to go, here's a provocative idea, and I'll give you some evidence for it based upon my research. And then, once we've done a section, which hopefully won't take more than 15 minutes, then you can split up into 4s or something and talk about it. And what I'd like you to do is think of a question about that section. But instead of asking me, I want you to ask it of the people in your little group of 4 or whatever. And hopefully one of those will give you a satisfactory answer. So it's a little bit of an experiment, of course. And then if you still can't quite answer it, then in other words, it's a really good question, then you could ask it me. And then we'll have a little bit of a discussion, and then I'll go on to the next one. So I'm not quite sure how it's going to work, but I'd like to do these little experiments, and I'll try and explain why it's a good idea. So we're going to do 3 today, and assuming I haven't put you off, then you can come back and do 3 next week, I think it is, next Tuesday. So what I'm going to focus on today is like what you might call the micro stuff. It's like the small scale stuff or the foundational stuff, which might not be quite as exciting as changing the whole system, which I'll do more next week. But I'm trying to like lay down a few basics, really. So what I'm going to do is the truth, speech, and action. It's got these nice little single words that sound a bit mysterious, so I'll show you in a minute. All right. So I am going to give a little bit of an introduction to the whole situation. So sorry, this pen's really rubbish, but hopefully you can read it. What I've done for 4 years. I came down, I don't know if you know, but I'm an organic farmer, so I spent 15 years weeding carrots and things and not really engaging in society because I didn't really like it very much. But then it rained a lot and my business went down the drain. And so I decided to come down to London to take out the system because I didn't like it very much. So that's my plan. And obviously want to study how to do it effectively. So that's why I got myself into King's College. So what I did in a rather sort of clumsy way initially is go to lots of campaigns with my little nerdy book of ideas and say to campaigns, you know, how about trying this? Which is a really bad way of going about research because you usually wind people up. So I wind quite a lot of people up, and I've been winding people up ever since, actually. But anyway, but initially, like, a lot of the ideas I had, I should emphasize, were all rubbish. So there's nothing like hitting the streets to find out why things don't work. A lot of academics, as I'm sure you know, spend all their time reading the books and don't realize that their ideas don't work. So I'll tell you a few embarrassing stories as I go along. So I'm just to show you, I've just been sitting in the library for 4 years. These are the campaigns I've been involved with. So initially, I was sort of involved in other people's campaigns, and I got a bit impatient and wanted to start 1 or 2 of my own, and they've culminated in the dramatic success of Extinction Rebellion. So first of all, there was an occupation about 4 years ago of London School of Economics. Then there was a graduate teaching assistant campaign at King's College, which was graduate teaching assistants, ways of exploiting people like me to do teaching for free, as it were, for undergraduates. Then there was Cut the Rent, which was basically the first successful rent strike in London / the UK for many years. Then I worked for the I think that's called I think it's called that anyway, International Workers of the World, IWGB. Oh, no, it's not. I'll take that off. It's of Great Britain. Anyway, IWGB, that's a union, and they do stuff with couriers, organising couriers, and Deliveroo, which you've probably heard about. It's a big campaign in London. Then I did this campaign, King's College Climate Emergency, which was get King's College to divest from fossil fuels. And then we went over to LSE again to do a Life Not Money campaign, which was to try and get the director to take a pay cut. That one didn't work. and then that was the end of my PhD proper. And since that, we've done a campaign called Stop Killing Londoners on pollution in London. And then finally, the grand finale was Extinction Rebellion, which is going on now. So I really don't like PowerPoints, but I don't like pens that don't work either. So you probably can't read this. But there's a few sort of, I'm going to refer to a few sort of key ideas. I don't know whether this is going to work very well, but I've got a few sort of sort of ideas. So, which have sort of influenced me. So I'm just going to briefly go through these. If you don't quite get it, don't worry, because I'm going to come back and sort of revisit them. But the first idea is complexity. So complexity from the very beginning has been one of my guiding principles. And this is just a posh word for basically saying that you can't actually know how things work. You can only have a probability. So this is quite a radical idea, of course, because most of politics is based on the Enlightenment idea that society is some mechanical machine and I know the truth and you don't, or if we don't know the truth, you'll be able to find it out. The idea of complexity is even if you know all the knowledge in the world, you still don't know what's going to happen. So you can only do a probability. So that's hopefully like makes everyone relax because it's like we don't have to know for definite what's going to happen. So all these ideas might not actually work. What my claim is they're more likely to work, if you see what I mean. Okay, politics in the social, basically that means like we've all got this idea from our culture that there's this thing called politics and then there's this thing called society or social relations, and the two things have different sort of universes, and a big theme of my research is you have to locate the political in the social. In other words, like social relations, like whether you like someone or you're looking for a boyfriend or you don't like eating chips, all these things aren't irrelevant to the activity of politics, right? They all need to be integrated. I'll go into that in a bit more detail. Human motivation versus rational self-interest. This is a well-known sort of debate in social science, which is in the good old days, all the sort of old academics were saying human beings are basically rational, self-interested actors, and you weigh up things and you make decisions, and this is obviously where economics has gone down the drain a little bit. But what I'm part of the sort of side of the debate saying that's like broadly bollocks, and it's actually human beings aren't actually rational or self-interested. They're more like herd animals, which isn't very complimentary either, but we'll deal with that in a minute. Distributional analysis. So basically what that's saying is one of the things that really winds me up is when people say people won't mobilize or people will do this or you'll put people off. So I hate the collective noun people because people is just like this abstraction, and if you're going to do sophisticated analysis, you want to realize that any set in a social system is basically a distribution. So some people are in the middle, and there's two outliers. And this is very important when you're doing like more sophisticated analysis with mobilization, which I'll again talk about a bit more. And the last one is like a bit cryptic, before 1989. So this is just like a bit like a radical idea that the world did not start in 1989 at the start of the neoliberal period. Yeah, there was actually several thousand years of history before that. And people were getting on with their lives and doing things which, according to the received wisdom of the neoliberal period, is either impossible or naive or, ridiculous. So a lot of my research is based upon sort of being inspired by the great things that happened in the 20th century before people decided you can only send an email if you want to change the world. Because there weren't emails before 1989, apparently, either. But there we go. So that's that. So what I am going to do is I'm going to do the first one, and then we can discuss it. Just thinking what else I need to say. Okay. So the first theme is truth. Okay. So I came to this one like a little bit late in the day, as it were, particularly around the Extinction Rebellion sort of design. And I've been thinking about it for a long time. And if you sort of go into most universities and you sort of discuss stuff, there's an implicit idea that the truth doesn't exist. So for instance, like in marketing, I mean, I was on a a panel about 2 or 3 weeks ago at King's College allowed me in to say something antisocial to students. But anyway, the presentation was how to present your message in an effective way. Okay, so I don't know if you're familiar with the word postmodernism, but basically that's the idea that there isn't really a truth, it's all social construction, you know. I'll say a bit more about that. So the implicit assumption of how to present your message in an effective way is it doesn't matter whether your message is true or false. Do you see what I mean? So the first thing I said to them, of course, was, well, it depends whether what you're saying, your message is true. Well, obviously that didn't go down very well. So I've been thinking about this a little bit, or quite a lot really. So my first sort of proposition, oh yeah, I'm going to tell you a story. So I'm trying to tell you a story at the beginning of each of these sections. So okay, so there was this is a story from my research. So basically there was a cut the rent campaign, okay? So all these students got together and they were all pissed off because they're paying £200 a week and there's rats in their rooms and the toilet doors are hanging off, blah, 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 you know, usual situation. And so you had like 30 students in a room. And then there was some sort of hardened activists and we got together and we said, right, we're going to try and mobilize these students to do the first successful rent strike in London for 4 decades or whatever. And I was going, yeah, this is great. And then, as you probably find if you mix with activists, they're all a bit of a negative sort of conservative bunch, no disrespect. So they were going, well, the most we're going to be able to reduce the rent by is what, 5%. I mean, if you got a 5% rent reduction, that would be like just amazing, wouldn't it? Because we've got to be realistic and pragmatic, and you know, it's the capitalist system, and it's really difficult to change it, and blah blah. So then the students went through this sort of participatory process. And one of the questions they asked was, okay, so the university, like, what do they have to pay for the accommodation? It seems like a reasonably innocent sort of question. So it turns out that their total running costs are only 60% of their rent, if you see what I mean. So as you may know, like, these people it's a big cash cow because they bought their properties at UCL, in 1910 or something, and then suddenly there's an asset boom, and it's like, wow, we can put our rents up and exploit the students, and that's great because we can pay all our rich directors even more money. So then the students discussed it, and in their little groups without the interfering influence of hardened activists, and they came up with the idea, the sort of innocent idea that, well, if the rent, if their cost was 60%, then 40% of it is just profit, right? So they don't need that. So the consensus decision was the truth that you don't actually have to be exploited. And so they came up with the demand, I think, I'm not very good on the numbers, by the way, but I think it was like a 30% pay cut, a 30% rent reduction, right? So all these activists were going, oh my God, that's so naive, do you know what I mean? But all the students thought it was great. So this was sort of interesting. So you might want to say, like, the transcultural truth of it is people shouldn't exploit each other. And if people shouldn't exploit each other, the truth, as it were, is you should, everyone deserves a little bit of profit. So 10%, that sounds okay. But it should be a 30% rent reduction. Do you see what I mean? So this was an example of truth before pragmatism. Do you see what I mean? So this is sort of interesting. So one of the things I want to say in this section is to try and create a context of where we're at in this particular time in 2019 in the UK, when the whole neoliberal experiment is cracking under its own contradictions, right? So what does that actually mean? So I'm not necessarily going to make a sort of moral judgment here, but as a sort of structural sociologist, if you read structural sociology, basically what that sort of area of literature is saying is that there's limits to what you can do and not do depending upon the structure of the society you're in. So you may want to sort of develop that and a few of them do. And they basically say, sometimes there's like reformist periods. And in reformist periods, right, the truth is more or less where it should be, which is in the middle of society, if you see what I mean. It's like what most people more or less want. But in what you might call structurally determined revolutionary periods, the truth is way out on an outlier. Do you see what I mean? Because everyone is forced into this false consensus that no one actually believes. No one really believes that the rent should be, 60% more than the costs, but we all have to because what the academics call a collective action problem, which is no one wants to move because no one's moving on it. So I have got, you probably can't see this, it might be a bit naff, but anyway, so here's my normal distribution curve of the opinions about the truth, as it were, and in a reformist period, the truth is more or less in the middle, maybe it wobbles around a little bit, but you can't change things very much because broadly society is where it should be, let's say. But in a revolutionary period, the truth is right out on the outlier, if you see what I mean. So you can argue whether it's objective or not. I don't really care, to be honest. But that's where most people feel it is in terms of what you might call transcultural ethics. Do you see what I mean? So what the structural sociologists will say is that in this situation, you're heading for a bit of a fall if you're going for the reformist agenda, because you won't be able to mobilize people because people are just fed up of the false consensus. Do you see what I mean? So from a structural point of view, my argument in all these campaigns is that the way to mobilize people is to tell people the truth and to have a campaign that tells the truth, okay? So this is obviously like a bit of a problem for traditional postmodernist radicals because they don't really believe there is one. But what my proposition, my first sort of controversial proposition, is there is a truth, right? And the truth is to act decently towards people and not exploit them, and it seems reasonable not to destroy the world in the process, okay? So obviously argue about the nitty-gritty. So what sort of happens in my hypothesis, and I'm going to support this with some evidence, is that in the revolutionary period that we're in now, is when you actually claim, when you try and mobilize around the truth, then you have a polarization in the distribution. So most people obviously aren't going to be that bothered because most people are never bothered. But you are going to attract people that are attracted to the truth. Do you see what I mean? Because they've got to the point where they don't really care about the false consensus anymore. And they're waiting for someone to come along and tell them the truth. Do you see what I mean? And then they'll funnel through to that situation. So I'm going to give you a few examples in no particular order. So at the King's College climate emergency, the truth was that King's College should divest entirely from fossil fuels. Like, that's what everyone secretly wanted. 96% of students wanted it, right? We did a little survey. But of course, the conventional truth was that's impossible, quote, lots of people said that before the campaign started. It's impossible because it's too much. You can't ask for that. That's not pragmatic. Do you see what I mean? So what you can ask is for a committee to research it for 5 years and come up with divesting from tar sands at some point before 2029. So that's what the conventional campaigning approach was, right? So the King's College climate emergency approach was to go for the truth, which obviously lots of people, didn't think would work. And, a very senior activist told me that, quote, that's a terrible idea. So obviously it's a terrible idea because activists are very conservative and don't really think they can bring about much change. But the gambit was that by telling the truth, people would come out the network, come out the woodwork, and so they did because it was exciting. And as we'll come on to, it's a campaign that was won. So I went to see I'm sure you won't mind me saying this, or probably you will, but anyway, I went to see the chief executive of Greenpeace. So he's a reformist man. So he said, myself and this other guy, both of us have got like 20, 30 years of sales and marketing experience, so we sort of know what we're going on about. He said, look, John, let's have, a campaign by Greenpeace that says we're in a climate emergency and we need dramatic action on the climate situation. And he said, no, that's like too abstract and ambitious and radical and all the rest of it. Yeah? So because he's in this paradigm here, right? If you're in that paradigm and you want to go to the edge, obviously that's not going to work. But in a revolutionary context, which we're in at the moment, where the system's going to collapse, the truth does work. Do you see what I mean? Which is why 6 months later we set up Extinction Rebellion and it's got 50,000 people following it, and Greenpeace are in a little bit of a pickle. That's because they had the wrong paradigm. Do you see what I mean? Which isn't anything unusual, right? If you look before 1989, there's several thousand years of these dynamics. It's nothing unusual. People that have been born into a system and think they can work it won't be capable of psychologically transferring over to a new paradigm. It's one of the unfortunate things about human beings. So, so I'll just give you a few sort of examples and then we'll stop, I guess, and you can talk about why it's a bad idea.
What happened with the rent? The student rent?
Yeah, got 10%. It won. I'll tell you more about that. Yeah, you just have to hold on, won't you, to find out how they all went. Keep you coming back next week. All right, so the reason why we know we're in a revolutionary period, I know revolutionary is a bit of a old-fashioned word, but I can't be bothered sort of giving it a nice ting, like historically, sociologists of revolution call a spade a spade. So revolution is basically when there's structural change in society, okay? It's nothing unusual. I know everyone thinks it's unusual, but it's not historically. So one of the reasons we know we're in that period is because all the conventional political activists, analysts, for the last 30 years have been getting it completely wrong since 2007, okay? So their rationale is, if you're down here, you're not going to ever make any progress, right? Because the truth's there, right? But they've got the wrong paradigm. So the reason we know there's wrong paradigm is, for instance, like Jeremy Corbyn comes along and you go to the betting office at the beginning of his campaign and you've got a 1 to 200 chance of him winning, right? So one of my mates put £100 down, he's quite well off now. So why did he have a 1 in 200 chance? Because the betting, the main establishment of political analysis, thought he was over here. Do you see what I mean? But he wasn't, was he? Because this is the situation. As soon as Jeremy Corbyn came along, then everyone went, wow, someone's telling the truth, which is we're being screwed by the elites and we're fucked off and we want to vote for this guy. Do you see what I mean? So loads of people channeled through and that's why he won. So this isn't unusual. We've had this mobilization with Podemos in Spain. We've had the Sanders campaign in the USA, same sort of thing. 2% face recognition at the beginning of the campaign. Within 6 months, 2 million people were mobilized. Why? Because he said there was going to be a political revolution. Okay? So that inspires people, and that's what people secretly want. Just like the students in that room secretly wanted just a semi-decent society where people don't screw each other too much. Do you see what I mean? So it's like, this is the new way to mobilize these people. So I'm just setting the scene here, do you know what I mean? Because we could just be all postmodernist and go, here's a few techniques, and it doesn't matter whether you're trying to mobilize people to wear red hats. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just all process. No, it's not. If you want people to wear red hats, it doesn't matter what mobilization strategy you're going to use. People aren't, because they don't really want to wear red hats. Do you see what I mean? So a truth actually matters. Sorry, postmodernists. So there we go on that one. So just finishing off on this, the big sort of element in this talk is radical mobilization. So there's the clue in the title, right? I'm not talking to you about mobilization, right? I'm talking to you about radical mobilization, radical being about the roots or the truth of the matter, if you see what I mean. Okay, and just a final point is to put this into a larger context. So one of the things which sort of inspires me is what you might call classical liberal political theory. So you might think I'm a really radical guy, but actually I'm most inspired by liberal tradition. And the old style liberal tradition isn't anything to do with neoliberalism. It's not even anything to do with like rational self-interest. The old liberal tradition goes back to the Romans and the Republican tradition, and what that tradition is saying is people aren't very nice. And if you give them too much power, they'll just screw you over, okay? So the name of the game is to control power. So all these campaigns, in a way, are campaigns against the concentration of power. Do you see what I mean? And this tradition would say that societies go in cycles. There's no progress. That's a little bit of a modern idea. There's just basically things get reformed and everyone's nice for a while, then they get corrupted, and then you go for a revolutionary period, things get better again, and just get this endless cycle, which actually has a lot of sociological evidence to support it as it happens. So what we're at the moment is we're at the trough. And we may not get out of it because it's quite a big trough this time. Okay, so that sort of sets the scene, as it were, for the next five issues. And God, it's 9 o'clock already. Right, good. So we can split up into groups of 4 or 3 or 5. I really don't want to be dictatorial. You've got your question in your mind. Ask the other people. I'm sure they'll answer it for you.
Any questions?
Yeah, preferably about what I've said, but, you know, no pressure. But yeah, if there was someone who asked a question and everyone going, oh, don't know, or really good point, there's rubbish on that, then you can ask me the question now.
We just had a very simple question about your diagram and the 2 axes. If you could explain what the 2 axes represent and why the point of conflict is off to one side, not the other, as it moves. Is the one the truth and one the lie on the opposite side? If you could explain the diagram a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, no, my diagrams are rubbish, aren't they?
What is the vertical and what is the horizontal?
So this basically means the distribution of the population.
This is population horizontal.
So some people way off the truth this way, and some people way off the truth that way. But most people are sort of broadly in agreement that a decent society is a good idea, which is in a reformist sociological structural situation. And then, I mean, you could have put the truth here, but it's just, it doesn't really matter. The point of this is that the truth is out on the outlier of what people think is reasonably possible. So when a society is degenerating, as it were, I can go into this a bit more, but like the society, because of what's called herding effects, which is everyone wants to do what everyone else wants to do, societies generally start slipping away. It all sounds a bit like Old Testament morality, but they start slipping away from the truth with a capital T. Do you see what I mean? It's a very unpopular non-postmodernist idea, of course, but you know, there's a lot going for it, which is, and then it's brought back to the word of God, as you might say, in the middle. You know what the truth is.
You look a bit Moses-ish. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. That's my plan. Going for the Moses look. I mean, I've actually been sympathising with Old Testament prophets the last year or two. I don't know. It's a bad sign. Is there any other tricky questions that anyone wants to ask at this stage? Yeah.
So the truth line out on the side there, is that the truth about what's happening or what should be done about what's happening?
Both. It's not supposed to be particularly sophisticated, but there is a prominent thing on what should be done. What, you know. So the truth in Cut the Rent strike, Cut the Rent was the rent should be a reasonable level related to the cost. That's like a transcultural morality that you don't, yeah. So it's like, that's what we should ask for because that's the truth of the matter morally, as you might say.
But what should we ask for in the case of climate change? I mean, we can,
well, the thesis...
we can just accept the science or say the science is actually behind the curve and things are worse than the scientists have been saying at this point. Which is probably
the thesis with Extinction Rebellion is the truth. The slogan is tell the truth and act as if it's real. So here's the truth, which is we basically got to decarbonise the economy extremely rapidly, otherwise we're going to go extinct. That's the truth, as it were. But of course, the conventional truth is that we need to try and fulfill the Paris obligations, but not really. Yeah, that's the sort of conventional truth.
What does that mean? Not really, what do you mean?
Well, I'm just being a bit sarcastic because there's no intention of the elites fulfilling the Paris agreements, if you've noticed. Yeah. Sorry, yeah, go on.
Saying that the situation of the truth is actually quite different from the situation of the truth of, what we can agree on as a white, middle class, kind of post-industrialist truth is quite different from the truth of what it is to live, say, in a Malian sub-Saharan village, where people are actually being affected by climate change. People might have completely different values, although, I understand what you're saying about similarities of truth in terms of like compassion. I certainly think corporate power is like something that needs to be dealt with. But I've had problems with saying that there's one truth, really, because I think there's lots and lots of truths about climate change and how it is affecting different people.
Yeah. So my controversial proposition is there is a truth, which is people shouldn't screw each other over and destroy the world. So these are transcultural truths. Obviously, the postmodernist argument is technically correct, is that, some people like to wear red hats and they think that's the right thing to do, and that's like culturally specific. So I suppose the name of the game is that both are true, as it were, both have some validity, but obviously there's cultural truths. But my argument would be there's also transcultural truths. So it's neither one or the other. And things have got imbalanced, as it were, when people say that transcultural truths are just cultural. Well, they're not. Do you see what I mean? But obviously, lots of people disagree with that. But I would argue that's one of the reasons we're in a bit of a pickle, because we can't really tell what's right and wrong, because we've just been told, it's just a way of things. Yeah. Is there any final question, and I'll move on? Yeah.
Are there any truths that would, say, transcend the compassion element? So, say if there was if we got to a point where we had to radically geo-engineer the planet, and because of that, we would create droughts, severe droughts in certain areas, severe floods in certain areas, and obviously impact a lot of people. We save the overall planet, and we achieve the truth, but at the expense of compassion. Do you believe that there are areas of truth that require that, or might require that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's loads of things where the truth isn't really obvious at all. So that's really my argument. I'm not some Old Testament prophet. I'm not saying there's a truth, and the truth is that you put your shoes on before 9 o'clock in the morning, otherwise you're immoral, right? That's like going to the other extreme, isn't it? So there is obviously a realm of politics where it's valid to have different views on things. What I'm trying to say is that in a structurally revolutionary context, that is defined by where the contradictions in society are so great that there will be a big rupture. And the rupture is usually over transcultural values, if you see what I mean. So, for instance, like before the French Revolution, a loaf of bread was worth, like in Lyon, where they had the first riots, was like £20 in modern money, right? And the people in Versailles were obviously having quite a nice time. So it's not really surprising you had a revolutionary situation. Do you see what I mean? So it's sort of stating the obvious in a way. Okay. We'll have some more questions sort of at the end as well, so you can knock down the whole edifice in one go. Okay, so the next thing, I'm sort of building this up, so you might think, so I'm sort of building it up into some big crescendo of effectiveness, as you might say. So it's a bit like that's stage one. You've got to actually have a campaign that says something real and truthful in a revolutionary context. So we've sort of established, for instance, that, that in itself is massively radical, as you're probably aware. So, for instance, like we had an interesting discussion with in the Green Party recently, where the outcome was that the Green Party wasn't really going to do anything on climate change because it wouldn't win votes. You see what I mean? So even in really radical circles, there's this massive sort of argument to not tell the truth. Do you see what I mean? Because it won't actually get us power. And you can see, I mean, it's got a lot going for it, but it hasn't got a lot going for it when you're in this particular context. So that's the first criteria, okay? So I'm going to talk about speech, which is like quite a different sort of area. So, so I did my little claim to fame is I did some award-winning research. And like a lot of award-winning research, it's not because you're great, it's just because you're lucky. It's a bit like archaeology and you find like a load of gold sort of thing. You know, sort of say that's because I'm great, but you're just lucky at the end of the day. So I was very lucky because I was able to do some research on 2 meetings that happened almost simultaneously with similar audiences, demographics around a similar issue. And if you know social science, they've got this thing called randomized controlled trials. So what you want to do is you want to take one thing and another thing, which both are quite identical, and do something to one thing rather than the other thing and see what the difference is. And if you create a difference, it's because of what you changed. Do you see what I mean? It's not because of something, some other factor. So what we did is with the Cut the Rent campaign, I'm going to tell you another little story, is that Cut the Rent campaign was a great campaign. It was just like nice and neat and successful. So we came up with a plan. Okay, so we're going to mobilize these students. You know, the rent was crap. There was all this social repression. You know, people thought they couldn't ask for a rent reduction because it wasn't realistic, but everyone really wanted one, and they were pissed off and blah, blah. So I said to them, right, well, what we want to do is this participatory meeting. So the treatment group, as you'd say, the group that we were going to do something different on was this participatory meeting. So a participatory meeting went something like this. There were a number of little, what you might call micro designs in it. So the micro designs were when people came into the room, someone welcomed them into the space. So someone there to have a little bit of small talk to them. We had tables out like this. People went straight to the tables. The chairs were around the tables, so you're immediately facing someone and you could have a nice chat to them. And then there was like orange juice and biscuits on the table so they could start eating, and people came in and having a really nice time within like 30 seconds because someone had welcomed them into space. And then they were chatting to someone because it's impolite not to chat to someone. And then we had like what you might call a participatory format where we introduced the topic that the rent wasn't that great, and then people talked about their experience, and they sort of bonded over how crap the rent was and never talked to anyone before about it and what have you. And then people discussed what the rent reduction would be, so they were able to like co-create their own demand, as it were. And they, as I've said, they came up with a 30% reduction demand, and then they had a third breakout group where they were going to discuss what to do about it, and they decided they were going to do leafleting and canvassing, and everyone's getting really excited, and everyone was going, yeah, this is fantastic, and people walking out saying it's the best, you know, meeting they've been to, and blah, blah, blah. And I did this little questionnaire, and, you know, people ticked how empowered they felt and did various other things, like find out how many people went to the next meeting. So that, I juxtaposed that, as it were, to what you might call the control group, which was what you might call a conventional political meeting. And a conventional political meeting, as you probably all know, if you've been to one, is like chronically boring. And it goes something like this, which is you get 4 of the great and good stand up, and they've got 15 minutes each, and they talk about something really worthy, and then you don't have any questions or anything, and then the next one stands up saying something very worthy, and then the third one and the fourth one, and that's like an hour, and then you have like 20 minutes of questions, if you're lucky, and then usually like 3 blokes stand up, usually of a certain age, like me, and they start asking some esoteric question, which no one else is really interested in, and they usually ask 2 questions because they think they're very important at what have you, and then everyone's sort of looking at the mobile phone and going out and all the rest of it. So I thought I'd put you off then. You're back. Okay, so you're sort of familiar with that format. That format's been going on, you know, whenever, since 1880, right? When the labour movement started and people used to do these like conventional meetings. So I'm not going to, as you probably noticed, I don't really do like specific PhD sort of stats for you. So I'm just going to give you 2 because basically like it's a pretty no-brainer what happened. So what happened was the people that came out of the treatment group, i.e. the participatory meeting, were 80% empowered, okay? There was various different sort of metrics, but to cut long story short, they're 80% empowered. And the people that came out of the conventional meeting, the control group, were 27% empowered, okay? And then, of course, you asked questions about why they felt that way, and they did a few interviews. And so with the Cut the Rent campaign, there were 32 people, I think, came to the first meeting, and 28 people came to the second meeting. And with the control group, i.e. the conventional, I think it was on education cuts or something, then 28, I think it was the same number of people, 30 people went to it, and the following meeting, 9 people went to it. So people sort of voted with their feet. So why was that? Okay, well, the first thing to say is this is the other big principle of mobilization, which is, dare I say it, people don't like to be talked to. And that's why I'm splitting you up to talk about what I've just talked about, not because I'm being virtuous, but because if I talk to you for more than about 20 minutes, you're probably going to drop off or start thinking about what you're doing tomorrow and what have you. So that's the sort of moral of the tale, is that if you want to mobilize people, you need to empower them, obviously, and then they'll come to the next meeting. Do you see what I mean? And the way to do that is to split them up into groups. That's the main dynamic. There's very sort of minor dynamics, like making sure there's biscuits on the table, and people don't think that's very important, but I would argue it is. And it's so this is another like big provocation for the political space, right? Because for the last 200 years since the Enlightenment, we've had this idea with politics and the social idea that there's this thing called politics, right? And it's out there, and then there's the rest of life here, right? But that's total bollocks, right? Because people don't leave their humanity outside the meeting. Do you see what I mean? They come in. They come in and still human beings. So there's two, I'm not going to start quoting loads of academics, because I don't really do that either. But there are 2 people that have, if you want to look into this more deeply, there are 2 really major figures in the 20th century that worked this out in completely separate fields. And this general point, of course, is being worked out in many fields. But the first field is in counselling. So in the good old days, the idea was you have a psychoanalyst or whatever, and you sit on the couch and he'd ask you a few questions and tell you why you're ill and expect you to take that on board. And then this guy called Carl Rogers came along in the early 60s and said, no. If you want to like empower people and enable them to cure themselves, then you have to listen to them and enable them to speak. Do you see what I mean? So it's like diametrically different idea. And, counselling, as everyone knows, is just massive, and, some of it works, some of it doesn't. But the point is like no one debates that anymore. If you want to, a major thing in bringing people on from mental disorder or whatever is to get them to speak. And the other guy in a totally different field is Paulo Freire. So you might have heard of him. A lot of people haven't nowadays, but he's really big in the 1970s. So he's like a Marxist sort of revolutionary guy in 1960s Brazil. And he worked out that the whole Marxist model was rubbish because it was basically a top-down model. The revolutionaries would run out to the peasants and they'd go, everything that you know is rubbish. I know what's happening. Here's Marx's theory of history. If you don't believe it, you're obviously a counter-revolutionary and what have you. And he worked out that this wasn't actually the most sexy way to create a revolution, because the peasants went, fuck you, we don't want anything to do with you, go away. So what he did was go into peasant communities and create like literacy courses. Now what's quite interesting, you might think that's not very radical, but through those literacy courses, people co-created through small group discussions their own reality. Do you see what I mean? Through learning to read. So the reading was just like that was just the frame. What Paulo Freire worked out is if you want to really empower people and mobilize people, then you get them to talk about their situation. Do you see what I mean? And then they discover other people who are in a similar situation. So that sort of makes sense, except that radical and progressive politics has been based on the top-down model, you know, since whenever, 1880 or whatever. So my own particular theory on this, and I can't like necessarily like prove it, as it were, but my hunch, which is connected with sort of other sort of research, is this, a lot of my underlying sort of analysis is questioning the nature of human nature. Do you see what I mean? So we've all been brought up with this idea, and particularly on the sort of Enlightenment left, is that you have these people and you give them information and then they radicalize, right? If you go into 95% of radical spaces, you have this underlying assumption, be something like, let's go out and do leafleting, you know, let's go out and talk to people, let's give people the information, and then they'll radicalize and mobilize, right? It's simply not the case, unfortunately. So the alternative idea and the hunch I've got is that we're actually primarily bodies before we're minds, and we are what we do. Okay, so there's lots of research that sort of shows this to be the case. And my proposition is that you radicalize through the act of speech. Okay, so it's the physical act. Okay, in the same way as if you're not feeling very good, you go and hoe the garden, and then you feel better because your body starts moving, and then you feel naturally more positive. Do you see what I mean? So we are a lot more like body than mind. Do you see what I mean? And you can see this hundreds and hundreds of times. I really don't understand why people don't get it, because you can just see it like everywhere, that whenever I do a meeting, as you probably know, I always split people up. And you think, oh, you know, maybe that's a bit radical. But as soon as people split up, they're going whoosh, and they're all having this amazing chat, you know. And it's because we're all social animals, and people just love to chat. Do you see what I mean? And you can see this like in a pub. If you go into a pub and you can watch people, and they're in groups of 3s and 4s, yeah, and they're all chatting away, right? But as soon as you get to a group of 6 or 7, they'll split into 2 conversations. Naturally, as you might say. You never go into a pub and find like one person chatting to 20 people. You know, it's really weird, but do you see what I mean? Because people love to actually just talk in what you might call a natural group. A natural group, just for the record, is around 6 to 8 people, okay, in terms of getting, you know, if you're just with one person, you might get really bored with them or something. But usually when you've got about 5 or 6, you know. But once you get past 8, it becomes a bit like, oh my God, I haven't spoken for a while, I'm getting bored or whatever. Okay, so a few other little elements in this. There was a really good talk, there was a really good article a while ago about a Labour Party. I think it was in Wood Green. I don't know if anyone's in the Labour Party. I've never been to a Labour Party meeting. But anyway, what I hear is not very interesting. Anyway, it was this Labour Party, I think in North London, and they'd had a really bad sort of election campaign. Anyway, these new sort of people came in, and they had these politics and pizza nights, right? So this is the great combination, right? Politics and pizza, or rather pizza and a bit of politics. And it got like loads of people in, and because it was a bit of a party thing, and you had the pizza, and you know, to cut a long story short, they just got loads of people in. I'm sure there's other dynamics, but like, and they won their seat. But like, of course, if you go to a conventional political activist and suggest pizza is actually a primary causal factor in mobilisation, they'll think you're a bit mad. But it's true, okay? Having a bit of food knocking around, people talking. And there is actually US research, which is even more like hilarious, which has shown that 50% of people that go to their first campaign meeting aren't actually interested in the issue anyway. Which is hilarious, isn't it? So, like, God knows why they're coming, according to the sort of politics people. But as soon as you look about it in a social sphere, then it's obvious, right? The reason 50%, or maybe it's 25%, or whatever, people go is because people aren't primarily interested in politics. They're more interested in hanging out with their mate. Do you see what I mean? Or getting a girlfriend or something. Do you see what I mean? So that's the reason why people go to meetings, to socialise. And the politics is like a bit of an add-on. Now, you say that to a political nerd and they'll just think you're mad. Do you know what I mean? Because they can't conceive of politics being encompassed by social dynamics. Do you see what I mean? Which is why they're always banging on about information. So, so a few things were sort of good and a few things were bad in this research that I did. So for instance, at the London School of Economics occupation, like 200 or 300 people went into this space and decided to occupy this big space in LSE. And for the first 2 or 3 weeks, it's like really buzzing. And my analysis of why it was really buzzing is because it was really participatory. Do you see what I mean? So you had all these people that were disconnected from politics and hadn't done anything political, and they suddenly came into this space. And of course, the conventional political people were said, oh, they came into the space and the reason they're all buzzing is because they realize capitalism is bad. No, no, no. They came into the space and they were all buzzing because they were talking to other people. Do you see what I mean? And having that sociability that, as if you're a student, you probably know, like being a student is quite isolating, and then suddenly with all these really interesting people. So you can compare that with the graduate teaching assistant campaign. So one of the big things about neoliberalism, it splits people up. So it's really difficult to mobilize them. So the graduate teaching assistant campaign had a really difficult time. One, because we didn't even know where the graduate teaching assistants were, because you couldn't find it out. So you had to go around all these common rooms, you know, going, excuse me, are you a graduate teaching assistant? And then every now and again you'd get one, and this poor person would be like semi-suicidal in the corner trying to do, you know, 8 hours of research in an hour that they paid to do their job. And we never actually got them together, so it's really difficult, obviously, to mobilize. Okay, so just to summarize this then, I always like to say, put this at the end of my paper. So it's this very respectable left-wing woman who was at the conventional meeting. At the end, she sort of stood up with revolutionary fervour at the end, and she said, we've got to get out and talk to people. Okay, so it's like, yes, we've got to get out to talk to people. No, okay, the slogan should be, we've got to get out and get people to talk. Do you see what I mean? Completely different.
And listen as well.
And listen, yeah, to talk and listen. And there's a little, I'll just do a little add-on, which is, I've done like 25 years of canvassing, mainly selling vegetables, but that doesn't really matter. But one of the things which you learn when you're door knocking, and if you want to like persuade people to do something, is you get them to talk. Do you see what I mean? And you think that's really counterintuitive. And there's millions of canvassers for the Labour Party. All these people have got completely the wrong idea. Right? They've got the idea, you knock on the door and say, Labour Party's great, vote for us, right? That's the worst possible thing you can do. The idea is to knock on the door and ask an open question, like, what's going on, right? And the general assemblies that have been done in Spain and what have you, and my friend Jamie, who specialises in general assemblies, is they always have an open question. Do you see what I mean? What's happening with this? It's not like, this is the situation. It's not like how to destroy capitalism. It's like, what's going on? Do you see what I mean? And then people co-create, they'll work out that capitalism's fucked anyway, right? You don't have to worry about that, right? What you have to do is create a space where they can discover that everyone thinks the same thing. Okay, that's that bit. So 5 minutes in your groups with a question that you might want to ask me, see if other people can answer it for you. No yawning. God.
Just about talking, I've just done the training for the talk, the Training for Extinction talk. In the structure of the talk, at the beginning there's talking, everyone's talking, and then in the middle. But it's quite long, either side of it. And the other danger with that talk is that if you then sort of let go, it can run away with itself. So I didn't allow questions, that sort of thing.
Yeah, okay. So there's sort of exceptions to the rule with most things. And the exception with the climate change emergency is a lot of people are simply unaware about how bad it is. So I'm not you know, what I'm, in all my little sections here, I'm not making some absolutes. Do you see what I mean? Obviously, people need to know something about what's going on. And with climate change, one of the biggest problems is people don't know. Now, having said that, you're totally right. That talk is actually problematic because it does go on for 40, 50 minutes. So how I would design it is you always get people to talk to each other at the beginning because that creates that atmosphere of sociability. And never start a meeting ever without getting people to talk to each other. And note, that's talk to each other, not have a go-round, right? Go-rounds are really boring. No one can hear anyone, and you can't remember anyone's name. If you want to create sociability, you want to create 3 to 4 people in a group, which is why you're having a nice time, hopefully. Do you see what I mean? And what I'd also do, and I think this might happen, is have a time in the meeting where people can discuss what's just been said. Do you see what I mean? And particularly towards the end, was the big sort of plus, as it were, to climate change talk. This is the Extinction Climate Change talk, which has been done hundreds of times around the country, in case people don't know, is have a time where people can emotionally bond over the grief of hearing that it's over, effectively, for the human race. So that's enormously powerful, because otherwise people will go away and be even more depressed than they are. Do you see what I mean? So I'm going to talk about action in a minute, so that's another element to it. But I'm sort of building up. So you want some information, do you see what I mean? But for something like cut the rent, everyone knows the rent shit, right? So you don't have to have a quarter of an hour Marxist analysis of the economics of rent in the 1880s. Do you know what I mean? That's really not what people need. So like a fellow researcher that I work with in Spain, so he's got this like phrase, people know it sucks, right? So you don't need to tell people it sucks. They already know that because we're in this revolutionary period. Do you see what I mean? So what you need to do is create a space where they can co-create their own solution to it and action. Do you see what I mean? So that's the balance on that, maybe. Yep.
Did some research into social movements as well, PhD as well, actually, social movements. And one of the things climate change, and one of the things I'm looking at is like intersectional organising, looking at lots of different issues, participatory democracy, direct action, autonomy, and how different movements are kind of using those things as ways of creating other ways of relating and living. But it's been tricky, it's been really difficult because it's a huge, I think as you found, it's a huge subject, huge amounts of fieldwork. The fieldwork is really, it's very difficult, very engaging and very difficult to step away from and to sort of find that balance of head between the academic and the activist, you know. And yeah, I think it's really important with bottom-up organising that you listen as well. Like, well, I've noticed with assemblies, say Occupy assemblies, something like this, it's really good to have open time when anyone can add anything to the agenda, that the whole meeting isn't directed, right? So that there's open time for anyone to raise any concerns, and maybe even to put some structure around that and kind of have brainstorming time about what is it, like you say, what is important to different groups about different issues. And just to open up the field massively so that it becomes a listening space and not a top, sometimes I think, as you say, assemblies can become top-down, sort of information and about the agendas of the people who are facilitating the meeting, not even by their fault, but just by lack of experience or lack of kind of conscious facilitation or whatever. And I think it's just so important to keep those ideas flowing from the bottom up. And I think that's how movements grow. That's how movements grow. That's another perspective on how movements grow.
Yeah, so one of the things which is a little bit tricky is with any sort of design process, there's like what you might call competing logics. So there's something, you get in an argument or you see an argument between two people, there's like, they're both sort of right because they're both in their little world, do you know what I mean? And the problem is they haven't got out of their little world to realise the competing logic has a legitimacy as well. So the major design principle is to basically balance logics. Do you see what I mean? So there is the logic. For instance, there's a logic of information. It's not like that's a rubbish logic, but it's actually really limited. Do you see what I mean? Which is you give people information and then they radicalise. Then there's the logic of the act of speech, which is people actually speak, they become radicalised. But then there's a logic that you have to give direction, to the structure. So for instance, when we did Cut the Rent, like we weren't going in there going, let's just talk about rent, right? We'd already done what you might call a meta-structuring of the space, which is we're here because we don't like the rent and we want to do something about it. Do you see what I mean? So there's a sort of action orientation to it. And one of the big issues, which is like handicapped movements over the last 30 years, is the notion of general assemblies where everyone can speak in inverted commas. But the physics, of course, is if you've got 200 people in a room in 2 hours, only a limited number of people can talk. Now, that's really problematic according to the logic of speech. Do you see what I mean? Because just the physics of it mean, you've got linear time, you've got a certain amount of time, only a certain amount of people can speak, which is why in Rising Up campaigns I've been involved in and the other campaigns I've worked on, the function has been, the design principle has been to split people into groups so that people can be empowered. So, but there are plus points of having everyone in a group, but only for a short amount of time. The one thing that you do want to avoid is questions. Because as soon as you've got questions, then people self-select themselves, and those self-selecting people, as I said, are usually blokes of a certain age that want to ask a really interesting question no one else is particularly interested in, and then they want to have a big debate about it. So this is why I always panic when I have questions, but you're a quite nice bunch. But we are coming up to the end of the questions session. But if someone else wants to ask a weird question, you can ask now, and then I'll finish off the next section. Yeah.
One of the issues you've got, mentioned was like when you're trying to convince people of an idea, they don't like to hear the truth. They want to ignore it, they want to be ignorant, they try to use slander against you. Like, what is the best way of getting around it?
Well, it's a little bit of a generalisation, but the point I'm trying to make about the speech section is that people will dramatically change their opinions if they're allowed to deliberate in a free and equal context. Okay? So there's lots of research on this in deliberative democracy. People will change. The reason why people don't change often is because they're like in a space where they can't speak their own truth. And you might think, well, there's lots of spaces where you can speak your own truth, but that's not actually the case. There's lots of subliminal messaging people get that they shouldn't be speaking their truth. So having said that, it's not like this is just one little section, if you see what I mean. So this is, if you just go for the speech routine, you're just not going to win your campaigns. There's various other elements which I'll come on to with the other sections. But so yeah, nothing I'm saying, I'm coming back to the complexity thing, nothing I'm saying is a golden bullet, right? It just increases the probabilities. Did you want to ask your question quickly?
I'm really curious about something, because in Occupy, I have this burning desire to know all the sort of, because I'm absolutely useless. I never do economics O level, never mind, any. Although I did get educated later, but I really didn't think I had a clue about what they were talking about most of the time. So I did something else, welfare, that was fine. But I was constantly obsessed with the notion that, the vast majority of people part of Occupy didn't actually know anything about what, why did the economic system collapse and what does it all mean and what's a derivative and blah, 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 blah. And if we don't know all that, because you're kind of teaching us almost the theory of organising in a way, that's how I see it anyway, for what it's worth. So if we don't know the organising theory, as it were, can we still organise? that's the question, because we still organise.
Yeah, so this is like...
You do a great job.
This is like the counterintuitive major thing I'm trying to say to people, is on the left, the left is full of people that go something like this. If only people knew, then they'd radicalise, right? And it's totally rubbish, right? People can know to sky how bad things are. It has no relationship to mobilisation, okay? So what people mobilise with is through speech and action and these other things, which I'm going to tell you about. So sorry, and the reason why people are so obsessed with information is because they're on this outlier called political nerddom. Do you see what I mean? Which is only like 1 in 1,000 people. There's 8 million people in this city, and you can guarantee that 99.999% aren't interested in what's going on in this room. Do you see what I mean? You're here because you're weird. So one of the big problems with mobilization is people assume that everyone else is like them. It's a big problem in marketing as well. Do you know what I mean? They go, oh, you know, I like organic veg, everyone else will. No, no, no. Most people think about organic veg about like 5 minutes a week, right? They don't think about it like all the time, like people that cook it. Do you see what I mean? There's 50 people in each city. And it's the same like with politics. Most people think about politics like 5 minutes a week. 5 minutes a week, if you're lucky. Maybe 10 minutes because there's Brexit. Okay, but most people don't. So when you're going, if you're going to do door knocking and stuff, everything is about sociability. Because that's the key determinant of action, is how people feel about what they're doing. Do you see what I mean? And the determinant of that is being able to engage in the act of speech with others. So that's like the foundation. We've got 2 foundations. I'm going to move on to the next section now. So we're sort of building up. It's quite exciting, I think. So building up, we've sorted out we're going for the truth, and then we've sorted out we're going to get people to speak. Okay? But none of those are going to get us to the big victory over the capitalist system or whatever, right? You know, we've got a few steps to go yet. So the next big step is like action. So I'm going to do action in sort of 3 parts. I'm going to do the basic gist with action in this talk, which I'm going to do now, but the really sexy bits are going to be next talk next week. So that's why you have to come back, because that's when we really get going into the juicy bits, which is like, wow, this is how non-linear political disruption happens, and we can get the bad guys and what have you. So you have to come back next week for that. But what I'm going to do this week is just like the basic principle of action, right? So one of the things that you sort of, one of the subtexts of these talks is conventional activists, nothing personal, really it's not personal, are rubbish at mobilizing, right? Activism, as it's presently constituted, is not a mobilization space, because people tend to be like old and cranky as far as the truth is concerned. They don't want to call out the truth. They certainly don't want to engage in enabling people to speak. What they want to do is talk about what the truth is and what's radical and why they're more pure than other people and all this sort of stuff, right? Which is all great, but it's nothing to do with mobilizing, right? Which is why London's full of like 100, 200 organizations that consist of 10 people in a room talking about some element of why they're better than everyone else. Do you see what I mean? So that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is the process whereby we have hundreds and potentially thousands of people going onto the street and doing stuff. That's the business we're in here. It's quite a different kettle of fish. In fact, when hundreds and thousands of people do go onto the street, you can be guaranteed that a lot of the activists will have been a big pickle about it. And if you're in Extinction Rebellion, you know this. You know, nothing like success for being criticised. Okay, so let's do action. So I'm going to tell you this sort of story about King's College climate emergency. So King's College climate emergency goes like this. You know, King's College hasn't divested from fossil fuels. That's not good. There's a conventional campaign which has been going for 4 years. They're on various committees. There's lots of warm words. You know, everyone thinks it's a great idea, but nothing's happening. So I enter the scene and I say, why don't you do some direct action? They say, no, we don't want to do that because we'll upset our relationships with management. And we know that if we carry on talking to management, we'll get some success, even though empirically nothing's happened for 4 years. But let's not get too worried about the empirics. Do you see what I mean? So you go to lots of campaigns, and this is the sort of general orientation. So I said, that's cool. I'm going to set up a little Facebook page, and I'm going to do some like little direct action-y things. I haven't quite worked it out. So me and this other student like heroically enter the field with the 2 of us to take on the bastion of elite liberal institutions, otherwise known as King's College. So what happens is we go for the information routine. because that's what we've got to do, right? We just need to tell people that climate change is just going to destroy King's and academia and everything else, and surely all those lecturers and students are going to pour into the lecture halls to hear this, rebel, and all the rest of it. So he put like about 1,000 posters around King's College going, you know, we're fucked, you know, here's what this scientist says, here's what that scientist says. What happens? So everyone should know what happens. What happens?
Everyone came to the lectures and talks and mobilised.
Unfortunately not. Not a single person, not a single lecturer got in touch. I tell a lie, one lecturer got in touch, but he didn't want to do anything. So there you are, that didn't work, but we thought we'd just try it out. And then we came up with the bright idea of spray chalking around it. So that caused a little bit of a rumpus. And then the first week of the new year, I went and spray chalked the front of King's College. That caused a bit more of a rumpus. And then we spray chalked the whole of the central lobby just down here, causing £10,000 worth of damage. That caused an enormous rumpus. Okay, so that's what I define as action, right? And what that meant was hundreds and thousands of students heard about what we were doing, and they came to support us. So in a way, like my whole PhD is basically summed up in the following 3 words, which is action creates mobilization. Okay, so it's turning around the old sort of paradigm. So the old paradigm is we tell people how bad things are, and then they'll mobilize. Do you see what I mean? No. What you have to do is go out and cause a rumpus, and then people will mobilize. Do you see what I mean? So as soon as you've got 5 or 6 people, you go out and block the road, or you go out and do something, preferably against the law, and then that causes like a big thing. People find out about it. So when we did spray chalk the walls of King's College, like lots of people came out, which I would call lone wolves, if you see what I mean. It wasn't like the Labour club of King's College came out in support. They were horrified, obviously, because they've got their careers to think of. What came out of it were all these people who were depressed in their bedsits thinking, well, we're fucked because of climate change. And then they saw something exciting and dynamic and welcoming and, you know, participatory and whatever. And they said, this is great. And they'd never been involved in politics before. They weren't activists. And off they went. Do you see what I mean? So this is like a little bit of a parable of how action happens. So what are the dynamics here? So why did this happen? First of all, because of embodiment, okay? So when people go and do action, they radicalize for the same reason as active speech. If you get people to talk about something or just read something, they're not necessarily going to fully radicalize. This happens over and over again. You've got a mate, he says, yeah, climate change, whatever. Then he goes, and, you know, street party in Hackney, like this Saturday, he comes out and goes, wow, this is great, you know, yeah, of course I'm going to, you know, go on the streets and sit down in the road. Right, what's happened? Nothing. He hasn't sort of suddenly discovered anything. His body has told him that he's enjoying himself. Do you see what I mean? You don't know why you've enjoyed it, you just do. And the reason is because you've participated in this collective act of action, which is have a bit of a dance in Hackney High Street or whatever. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that action creates attention. So attention is what people are looking at you. They're looking at you in Hackney High Street and going, wow, that's sort of exciting and sexy and interesting. I'm going to, you know, look at the leaflet now and actually do something. You've just got a leaflet, they're going to ignore it. Do you see what I mean? So, and the third thing, which sort of carries on, it's a bit of a continuation from attention, is drama. So, of course, drama is a bit of a bad name on puritanical left-wing circles because it involves emotion. God knows we don't want that. So why people mobilise is because there's drama going on. And drama is just a posh word for sort of like gossip, really. So this is a transcultural thing as far as I'm aware. Everyone loves to gossip. You know, so-and-so's with so-and-so, and they got upset about that, and they're about to split up, and all this sort of thing, right? So in left-wing circles, everyone thinks that's like degenerative activity. But it's like at the heart of sociability is wanting to know bad things that are happening to other people. You know, we all like it, right? Let's admit it. So this comes back to the sort of politics is in this social field, you see. So I'm just going to this little thing. Here we are. We've got drama. Drama covers a multitude of sins. It's in soap operas, and it's about what you talk about down the pub, and blah, blah, blah. And a little subsection of it is politics. Do you see what I mean? So people like politics when there's drama happening. And action creates drama. And drama is what brings people out because they're interested in how it's going to unfold, right? This is why people watch soap operas, is because you get to the end of it and you want to know whether so-and-so is going to split up with so-and-so, and you watch the next series. So you've got this like narrative, this dramatic narrative. So it's the same in politics, you know, it's like you're going to go onto the streets on April the 15th and people going, will they bring the government down? Oh, won't they? You know, I'll switch the telly on and find out, oh, I might go down myself, and oh, it's not going to happen because they're going to get sold out by liberals. Oh no, the radicals have come along and they've got rid of the liberals, and oh, fantastic, and the government's fallen. You see what I mean? So it's all a big sort of thing, and everyone's animated. Okay, so so what I want to say is that, yeah, so you've got your campaign, it's telling the truth, fantastic, and then you're getting people to speak to each other and discuss things, fantastic, but if you haven't got the action, there's the iron law of entropy, okay, which goes something like this. You get 60 people at the first meeting, and 40 people at the next meeting, and 30 at the next, and 24 at the next, and within 5 meetings, I can more or less guarantee there'll be 6 of you. Okay, has anyone been in a campaign like this? Okay, so I'm going to give you some stats. So never say I'm not a proper social scientist. Here's some facts. So at the LSE occupation, they had this amazing occupation, and thousands of people came, and they were in the papers, and they were going to change the world, and they had these big demands that LSE was going to democratize. Fantastic, you know. The following year, I was sort of getting in there in my slightly arrogant way, saying, hey guys, why don't you do another occupation? And they were going, no, you know, that's tricky, you know, that tells what to do, which is fair enough. And then they started off with 60 people at their first meeting, and then within 5 meetings, there was 9 of them. 5 meetings later, and there's 9 of them are going, what's going wrong? I was going, well, you haven't done anything. And they were going, well, don't want to hear that. So they didn't, and nothing happened. So even with a really well-organized campaign like Cut the Rent, so Cut the Rent, you think that's great, you're going to send out canvassers, fantastic, you know, participatory design, everyone's talking to each other, fantastic. So they started off with 30 people at the meeting, and then 5 or 6 meetings later, they're down to 7 or 8. And they're all sitting there going, oh, we're going to have to call the campaign off. And I was going, no, don't do that. You know, just push on ahead. So there was like 3 of us, and we said, right, we're going to actually call a rent strike. So it got down to about 5 people, and we just went and canvassed this hall, and then used this thing called conditional commitment to sort of get people to say they wouldn't pay their rent. And we went around 100 people and said, don't pay your rent if 100 other people don't pay your rent. And we had this like mad dash, just done in 3 nights. The first successful rent strike in modern British history was done in 3 nights of canvassing, and 100 people went on rent strike. Fantastic, okay? And then, thank you very much. The real question is, why hasn't it happened again? Well, let's think about that one. But so what happened then is, because there was loads of action, like at the next meeting, there were 60 people. Why? Because there was action and drama. Do you see what I mean? So then loads of people, and then 1,000 people went on rent strike because you'd sort of, you know, it was on the go. Do you see what I mean? But if we hadn't, so we had this like, I don't know, in a lot of campaigns, you get to that sort of crisis point. I mean, Extinction Rebellion is a bit like that. You get to sort of mid-January and everyone's going, oh God, you know, we're not going to be able to get to April and do this revolution. But you have to sort of push on, because once you've actually got an action, then everyone starts mobilizing again. Do you see what I mean? So the best way to destroy a campaign is to discuss what you're going to do, right? Because as soon as you start discussing what you're going to do, then everyone disappears. Once you've decided what you're going to do, everyone comes back, okay? So obviously that's a bit of a generalization. But so another example is radical assemblies. So after the Tory election victory, I think there was 2,000 people in the room, and they were going to do these fantastic assemblies all over London. And there was 2 characteristics of these radical assemblies. 1, loads of talking. 2, no action. I don't think they ever did anything. Is that right? Anyway, so this guy from Hackney told me they'd had his first meeting, like there was 60 people, and it was all, yeah. And 6 months later, it was like 6 of them discussing Marx's theory of value or whatever they were doing, and that was the end of that. So, to give you a few little more examples, and then I'll stop. Something that really brought it home to me, I think this is a bit weird, but I thought it was quite interesting anyway, was when with the King's College climate emergency, I went on hunger strike. So I had this bright idea, or someone had the bright idea, that we're going to put leaflets through all the doors of the lecturers. Because how do you get hold of the lecturers, because they're never around. So great, we're going to do this spiky little thing and push these letters underneath the doors, which happened most of the time. Every now and again, the carpet was a bit stiff, but you got it most of the time. So we did 500 on them and thought, great, lecturer comes in the morning, reads the piece of paper, Roger Hallam on hunger strike, terrible, I'm going to go down and have a chat to the poor guy, So we put 500 through and no one came. So I try not to get bitter and twisted about it. But and then I was sitting outside King's College, feeling slightly bitter and twisted, because all these students were passing by and stuff. And there were like these people on the bus stop, right? So they were just standing on the bus stop, like looking at me. And because I'm a proper social scientist, I worked out 23% of them actually looked at me and my little thing, and quite a few of them came up to have a chat. So these were just normal members of the public. Do you see what I mean? So the moral of the tale, again, is action, proximity, creates mobilization, creates interest, right? Bits of paper don't. It's like one of those penny dropping moments that average bod on the bus stop is going to be more interested because I'm only 10 meters away going day 12. Okay, so to sort of sum up on this, I've just said, like, with the rent strike, so often a campaign, you think, it's all going to build, but it doesn't. You have this big surge of interest at the moment, and then it all dribbles away a little bit, and then you have this moment of crisis where usually it ends, but you might push through to inaction, right? So some of the literature, which I think is interesting on civil resistance, is most civil resistance movements in the global south and what have you that bring down governments, they've done this research on a statistically big set, like 300 of them, and they found out that the average civil resistance movement lasts 3 to 6 months. So if you want to stress yourself out, you can think about that for a minute, that when you're going to create this revolutionary surge, you've got 3 to 6 months on average to do it. So this idea of spending several years getting your ducks in a row, like most people do, is just not going to do the business. So what you have to do is like get it on the go and then learn on the job, make some massive risks, shake a few dice, and you might get there. But if you want to, like what most people do, I'm sure many of you have been in meetings where people go, we're not going to do anything until we've sorted out what we want to do. Hasn't everyone been in those meetings? And I spent like 10 years setting up workers' co-ops and housing co-ops, and I could tell within about 2 meetings whether they were going to get there or not. And the big criteria is these people going, we can't do anything until everyone's come to a meeting to decide by consensus what's going to happen. And they felt very virtuous about it. And you go 2 years later, still be waiting for Joe to turn up to decide whether Jack was right who hasn't turned up, all that. And the ones that worked are the ones where 3 people went, we're just going to do it anyway. Do you see what I mean? So I don't know if that's an argument for, elitism or whatever, but I'm just being a social scientist and telling you what the stats are, if you know what I mean. Okay, so that's the sort of race against time sort of thing. So I'm going to say more about climate change, obviously, in the next talk. But the big sort of structural point about Extinction Rebellion is that people mobilize not because of a rationale, but because shit's happening. Do you see what I mean? So the big reason people rightly say people haven't mobilized about climate change is because it's not really happening yet, right? Which is correct, right? It's half correct, So you read all the psychology. So it's really important, it's really difficult to mobilise people about climate change because nothing's really happening, and obviously terrible things are going to happen in 30 years' time, but they haven't happened yet, and so we can't mobilise anything, so never mind. Do you see what I mean? So that's like half correct. So the creative way of doing that is to create the shit now. Do you see what I mean? So that people will mobilise because London's ground to a halt. Now, the fact that London's ground to a halt because you're blocking the streets is neither here nor there, because people aren't actually rational. They don't think, well, that's not about climate change, so I'm not going to get upset. They get upset and then start thinking about climate change because they're upset because there's shit happening on the streets. Do you see what I mean? So this is, obviously all these liberal academics aren't going to say that because they'll lose their funding. But what the game changer here is to create the action now. Do you see what I mean? We need to create the drama because people mobilise through action. Do you see what I mean? So this is the big meta rationale for mass civil disobedience. Do you see what I mean? And that's why we need to create it now. I mean, obviously, in a nice world, you wouldn't have to, but when you compare it with what's going to be coming, then obviously, you know, it's justified. So I'm not going to do questions because we're going to do a little chat. So we do 5 minutes and then 10 minutes of discussion. So I'm just going to have a little summary before you ask me embarrassing questions, just to get my little sales pitch in, which is that I basically came to London 4 years ago, didn't know anyone, and in those 4 years, I basically helped design a number of groundbreaking campaigns. And I'm not bothered about whether people think I'm great or not great, but the point is my argument is that these were brought about through systematic study of what mobilises people, rather than what's right and wrong, or why the world's a bad place. So we created the first rent strike in London for using some of these techniques. It was the fastest divestment campaign ever using these techniques. And we've mobilised thousands of people for the first time on climate change using some of these techniques. Okay? So I'm going to obviously expand on that in the next talk. But what I'd like you to consider is that something along these lines is basically the code which is going to save our society from the terrible things that are going to happen to it. So it couldn't be more important. So I'm not saying, like, obviously this is the perfect scenario, but I would suggest to you that this is in the ballpark of what needs to happen, if you see what I mean, in terms of transforming radical politics, if it's going to actually do what it says on the tin. And for too long, people have been reading the wrong literature. They've been reading why the world's bad. If you go to most radical people and ask what they're reading a book on why the world's bad. But knowing about why the world's bad has no relationship to actually changing it. And I would suggest the moral imperative is not to know why the world's bad, but to be able to change it. That's my tradition anyway. So all your guys are really empowered by this information to go out and become more effective. And my little positive sort of summary of that is that it doesn't actually take that many people, right? This is the interesting thing that's positive about it. Get 5 to 10 people who know these codes, as you might say, and they can transform the politics of a country. And if you don't believe me, then you can look at this, the literature on nonlinear dynamics. I can talk about that more next week. So, for instance, with the rent strike, first rent strike in London was literally created by 4 people, right? 4 people. And thousands of people got a rent reduction. And then since then, there's been no rent strike. There's been no rent strike. There's been loads of people talking about it, and loads of people saying how bad it is that people are exploited, but there's no rent strike. Why? because it's been taken over by people that spend most of their time talking about what they're about or talking about why it's bad, okay? And having a big infrastructure. You don't need a big infrastructure. All the really exciting things are done by small groups of people. The IWGB, tiny union, is the most successful union in London in terms of mobilising the casualised workers, because it has a mobilisation routine which is very similar to mine. They sort of worked it out before me, as it were, so the credit goes to those guys. But it's very similar. Action-based, welcoming, participatory, practical. Yeah? So that's my little pitch. So now you can tell me why it wasn't a good idea, or you can ask me some questions.
I was just wondering whether we're in a situation these days where quite often if you have a demonstration, there's a counter-demonstration. You've got your standard sort of dichotomy of the free Tommy Robinson and the make sure Tommy Robinson keeps in jail demonstration. And if both sides, as seems to quite frequently be the case, are doing the same thing functionally, so they're gathering in a space, they're doing a march, and the point of action, as you say, is to create drama, to get people's attention, to get them thinking about the issue at hand. I'm wondering what the limit is on how you differentiate yourself in that situation. Because the important people, it seems to me, aren't the people who are on the marches. It's not the people who are marching to free Tommy Robinson or the people who are marching to keep him in jail. It's the dispassionate observers and which side they start thinking about more. What's the limit on how you create?
Well, I'm going to talk about that more in the next talk, which, as I say, gets onto the exciting bit about conflict and the dynamics of conflict and the relationship between social conflict and mobilisation. But the short answer is you need to create a political drama, which is basically a moral drama that brings to the surface the immorality or injustice of the issue, if you see what I mean. So you need something that dramatises that. So, for instance, like when Gandhi went to the coast to make salt, like they were prevented because it was illegal. So they had a load of British police guys there, sort of hitting them on the head and being, extremely violent. And that dramatised the injustice of British rule in India, which is they were forced not, even something as simple as making salt, they weren't allowed to do. And not only were they not allowed to do it, they got beaten up as a process. So that destroyed the veneer of entitlement, as it were, for the British occupation of India. So if you wanted to do that in terms of fascism or something, then you need to design a confrontation with fascists which brings to the surface the immorality and injustice of what fascism means. Do you see what I mean? And, that's a design challenge. I'm not sure quite how you do that because I haven't really thought about it. But certainly, just doing a march is not going to do that because,
Yeah, I can see that with the climate, with the Extinction Rebellion thing blocking the bridges, I can see that and how that was a clever tactic. But isn't the issue with climate change that it's going to kill people, that people are going to die? I mean, my point is to meaningfully represent what's going to happen in climate change. I'm not saying you've got to kill people, but I'm saying that seems to be a kind of logical endpoint. What happens when you have to go there? What happens when that's the last place to go to?
Yeah, you say something good.
There's an amazing group in Germany. It's called the Center for Political Beauty, and what they say they're doing aggressive humanism. So they say they're artists, they're not activists. I think what they're doing is activism. What they did, they wanted to portray how Europe plays with the lives of refugees by letting them drown in the Mediterranean. They got some tigers, put them up in a space, in an arena in front of a theatre, and basically threatened the politics to have a refugee eaten by our own free will to demonstrate the Roman Empire game we're playing again. They got really the politicians to sweat. Because with these guys, you never know what they're actually doing and if they actually end up doing what they say they will. I can't remember really how they resolved it without anybody getting eaten, but they certainly got so many talks, and the politicians actually tried everything to get these tigers away. Like they tried to find any legal loophole to take these tigers away, and they failed. They also built a Jewish war memorial in front of the head of the right-wing party in Germany and put cameras on it and stream it for the next 10 years. I think they have it funded. So these guys go really extreme. And people tried to stop them in all kinds of bases, but they somehow managed to get away with pretty much a lot. And they were incredibly fast in mobilizing. They're incredibly fast in portraying extreme situations in a very artistic way. So there are certainly ways where you can portray the danger of people actually dying in a creative form of performance.
So if you feel like you've got to the point where you have to kill people, just get more creative would be the...
Yeah, absolutely.
Fair enough.
Certainly people weren't sure if they actually going to end up having someone eaten by a tiger, especially there was a Syrian actress who said, I will be eaten by the tiger. So they were extremely good. Look them up. Center of Political Beauty. They're a really good example of how to do really extreme things. To
Okay, so that's good. We'll talk about that more next week. The ins and outs of death.
What happens after April and after this massive international mobilisation, if it doesn't affect the change straight away that we want? Is it just the idea just to keep doing it and continue, or will everyone run out of energy because they've just... I mean, how long can it be sustained for in terms of a rebellion? Well, obviously nobody knows that really, but...
Well, that sort of comes back to this complexity thing, because one of the main problems you have trying to persuade people about all this is people think it's a mechanical thing, and if you do what Roger Hallam says, it will produce X, or won't produce X. But the reality is it's just likely to produce it, or it maximizes the chances of success relative to the other options. Do you see what I mean? That's all I'm saying, because it's a complex system, right? So we're going to have this thing on the 15th of April, right? And I'm throwing a dice, say, 60% chance that it's going to actually produce a structural result, which is dead high. So eat my words. But there's 40% chance we won't get to the tipping point. And so, if you know, the brutal reality of it is like mass mobilization movements don't last more than 3 to 6 months. So you probably go in a wave, if you see what I mean. So it might like fall apart after April, or it might not, because it's quite organized and it's done a lot of movement building. But so the great thing about Extinction Rebellion is that, you know, we can talk about this more next week, but it has an infrastructure. So in a way that something like France doesn't. Do you see what I mean? So in France, like, there's 100 leaders, there's no infrastructure, and so what you're going to get is a massive mobilization and a massive collapse afterwards. Well, with a lot of the guys who have tried to evolve what you might call sustainable mobilizations, particularly in the States, are trying to fuse the sort of old style organizing, you know, we have committees and all that sort of business and go out leafleting on Saturdays, with the French model. Hi. The French model, which is, fuck it, we're just going out in the street. Do you know what I mean? Don't tell me what to do. And obviously that's got its pros and cons. So the holy grail is arguably to try and combine the two, of course. But whether we're successful, history will tell. Yeah.
Went to a talk about Extinction Rebellion in Green Earth Awakening, and one thing that someone said there stuck with me, and was that what are we going to replace this current narrative with? You know, like what comes after, like even if we succeed, let's say, and we take down the social system as it is, what will come after it? And if we don't have the answers for it, it wouldn't be a good idea to like create this dream of what we want it to be and like walk towards that direction. Do we have what we want, a system of, do you know what we want it to be after, if we succeed?
Okay, so it's this really, really interesting topic, because it brings us back to this whole old style notion that you need to know what you're doing before you do it, right? But the empirics show most people don't know what they're doing when they're doing it. And secondly, they're not actually that bothered, okay? Because it's sort of cool. Do you see what I mean? So a lot of people who come to meetings, they'll go, I don't want to do this because I don't know what your program is, right? But they don't actually know themselves that much, because like 6 weeks later, there will be 10,000 people on the streets, and they'll be coming anyway. They still haven't got an answer to the question, because we're fundamentally herd animals. You know, what we do is we do something because other people are doing it, and it looks more interesting than what we're doing at the moment. So that's the first point. The second point is the more that you've actually defined your purpose, the more unsuccessful you'll be, because loads of people will disagree with you. Do you see what I mean? So everyone, we had this big discussion, Extinction Rebellion. I was going, oh God, we had this big gathering. We've got to sort out our purpose. And I can tell you, right, the quickest way to destroy a movement is to decide on your purpose, because everyone's political egos come out and they go, there's no way I'm going to agree to that, because, you know, vegans and intersectionalists, they're all coming out of the woodwork and going, no way, sort of thing. And then everyone's super virtuous and nothing gets done. Okay, so virtue is like whatever. I'm not exaggerating. I've seen it 100 times. So movements generally like become successful because they have a fundamental ambiguity. Do you see what I mean? About where they're going to go. And it doesn't matter because most people don't really care. Like nerdy intellectual people care, which is why nerdy intellectual people are never on the front line, because they're sitting at home going, that's terrible, they're reformists. Right? When the revolution's happening, they're calling the police or whatever because it's not quite right or whatever. And so it's mainly people that are just excitable. Do you see what I mean? It's people that want something interesting to go on. And you think, oh, that's terrible, you know, I'm obviously, you know, breaking loads of taboos here by saying that. But I'm just giving you the social sites on it, you know. Like, that's my observation. And I know, I'm a total nerd, do you know what I mean? So I've had to learn that loads of people aren't like me. You know, if I want to mobilize people, the last way I'm going to mobilize them is by pretending they're like me. Because if they were like me, I'd just give them like, you know, a load of books. And go, wow, they'd read the book and go, wow. But that's not how most people act, in my experience. Yeah.
Just kind of in relation to that, there is a group in XR, a working group called the Visioning Working Group, talking about what is the change that we want to see in the world and how do we get there. But the main position that we have in the messaging team is that we don't say what the solutions are to the problem that we're in a broad sense. We don't say everyone should go vegan and we need to dismantle the fossil fuel, well, maybe a little bit dismantle the fossil fuel industry. But we don't say everyone should go vegan, and we don't say we need to go to 100% renewable energy. That's probably pretty clear, and a citizens' assembly, which is the third demand, would most probably decide a lot of those things. But it's not up to us as the radicals in the far corner of society, whatever, to decide what happens to the rest of society. It will be up to the citizens' assembly to decide what the new system is and what needs to be done to get there. So what we're trying to put in place is not the solution or the new system, it's the system to change the system, is the way that I see it.
Yeah, so this is like a really interesting creative solution, because I think the point behind your question that you've just said is, and I'm sure you're all thinking it, that's great, Roger, it's going to be a revolution, no one really knows what's happening, and then the day after, everyone's going to start killing each other because they all had misunderstandings about what it's about. Do you see what I mean? So that's the usual routine, right? So it's like a really big bind, because if you try and create your program, everyone's going to fall out and you're never going to get there. And if you don't have a program, then you're going to get there because everyone can project their political egos onto the movement. And then the day after, it's like payback time. It's a bit like a relationship, you know. You're not really quite sure why you love someone, and then after 6 months, it's a bit like, you owe me, do you know what I mean? Because I've been nice to you or whatever. So, you know, it's like there's that sort of crisis, do you see what I mean? So this is like a perennial problem. There's no, I don't know if there's a solution to it, but a potential solution to it is to say to all these political egos, hey, you're going to have your solution, you'll get your little vision through the citizens' assembly. And because all these people think they're right, even though they disagree with each other, then you can leave it to the citizens' assembly. And of course, no one wants to be undemocratic, so they don't want to say, well, I'm going to go against the citizens' assembly, obviously, because that's not going to look very good. So basically, that's a solution, and the citizens' assembly basically decides what's going to happen. Do you see what I mean? So this is potentially a game changer in how to do revolutionary design. Yeah. Let's hope so. Okay, any last question, or is that it? That's great. Okay, so Tuesday, 7 o'clock next week for the final act. Thank you very much.